Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, the podcast that translates the latest congressional action into plain language insight. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're unpacking a packed docket, resolutions celebrating energy, a series of House bills on health, finance, infrastructure, wildlife, and even a foreign policy restriction on Cuba. We'll also walk through what the congressional record from April 6, 2026 tells us about the day's business, and we'll explain how these measures move through the legislative process. Not energy-focused resolutions.
Let's start with the two energy-related resolutions. The Senate has passed Senate Resolution 430, designating October 4, 2025, as National Energy Appreciation Day. The language highlights the role of U.S. energy producers in reducing poverty, bolstering national security, and improving global quality of life.
It's a symbolic gesture, but symbols matter. Historically, Congress has used national days to raise public awareness. Think National Aviation Day in 1939, which helped build support for early aviation policy. This resolution could set the stage for future legislative pushes on domestic energy development, especially as the administration rolls out its clean energy agenda.
Right after that, the House introduced House Resolution 788, expressing support for designating October 8, 2025, as National Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Day. Hydrogen is being touted as a bridge fuel between fossil fuels and full electrification, and the resolution signals bipartisan interest in expanding research and infrastructure for fuel cell technology.
Both resolutions are simple in that they don't require funding or regulatory changes, so they bypass the committee markup stage and go straight to the floor for a vote. That's why they can be adopted quickly, often within a single session. Foreign Policy Bill.
Shifting gears, House Bill 8103 seeks to prohibit the use of federal funds to conduct military force against Cuba. In legislative terms, this is a funding restriction amendment. If passed, the Department of Defense would have to certify that any operation involving Cuba is not funded, effectively limiting the president's ability to launch such actions without new appropriations.
Historically, similar restrictions have been used to curb U.S. involvement in foreign conflicts. Think the 1973 War Powers Resolution. While a funding ban isn't a full prohibition, it adds a procedural hurdle that can shape foreign policy decisions, especially given the ongoing debates over U.S. presence in the Caribbean. Healthcare bills.
A cluster of healthcare measures follows. First, the Outpatient Surgery Access Act of 2026, House Bill 8091, aims to expand the settings where Medicare and private insurers must cover outpatient surgical procedures. By reducing the requirement for inpatient admission, the bill could lower costs for patients and free up hospital capacity.
The Provider Reimbursement Stability Act of 2026, House Bill 8163, addresses a different pain point: payment volatility for physicians and hospitals. It proposes a multi-year rate-setting mechanism, which could smooth cash flow for providers, especially in rural areas where revenue swings are more pronounced.
Then there's the Perinatal Workforce Act, House Bill 8089, targeting the shortage of obstetricians, midwives, and neonatal nurses. It proposes grant programs and loan forgiveness for professionals who serve in high-need communities, echoing the 1990s National Health Service Corps model.
And let's not forget the FETCH Act of 2026, House Bill 8179. FETCH stands for Facilitating Emerging Technologies in Clinical Health. It would create a streamlined pathway for FDA approval of digital health tools, such as AI-driven diagnostics, by establishing a, quote, fast-track review board. If enacted, patients could see innovative therapies reach the market faster, though consumer privacy safeguards will be a key debate.
All these bills illustrate how Congress is trying to balance cost containment, provider stability, and technological advancement in healthcare. Financial sector bills.
On the banking front, we have three interrelated measures. The Growing Deposit Insurance for the Future Act, House Bill 8088, proposes raising the FDIC insurance limit from $250,000 to $500,000 per depositor per insured bank. The rationale is to protect savers in an era of higher interest rate accounts and larger balances.
Complementing that is the Main Street Depositor Protection Act, House Bill 8087, which would require the FDIC to conduct stress tests on mid-sized banks and to develop contingency plans for rapid payouts in a crisis. It mirrors the post-2008 living will requirements imposed on large banks, but focuses on the Main Street institutions that hold the bulk of everyday deposits.
Finally, House Bill 8090 directs the FDIC and the National Credit Union Administration to analyze whether insurance coverage should be expanded to, quote, coverage transaction accounts, such as certain money market and sweep accounts. The analysis would be reported to Congress within 180 days, giving lawmakers data to decide on future coverage expansions.
Together, these bills could raise consumer confidence in the banking system, especially after the recent wave of fintech disruptions. Contimens, minus res, new vs, contimens, new vs minus.
The Responsible Cormorant Management and Control Act of 2026, House Bill 8195, addresses wildlife conflicts that affect fisheries and aquaculture. It authorizes the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to implement non-lethal control measures where cormorant populations are deemed to be causing economic harm. While niche, it reflects a broader trend of Congress tackling specific environmental economic issues.
Infrastructure gets a nod with the Roadway Resiliency Act, House Bill 8186. This bill would allocate federal grant money to states for projects that improve road durability against extreme weather. Think flood-resistant bridges and heat-tolerant pavement. Given the increasing frequency of climate-related disruptions, the act could be a key component of the nation's climate adaptation strategy.
The COMPETE Act, House Bill 8082, stands for Creating Opportunities for Manufacturing, Production, and Employment Through Competition. It proposes tax incentives for companies that invest in advanced manufacturing technologies, aiming to keep U.S. production competitive globally. Historically, similar tax credits, like the 1990s Advanced Manufacturing Tax Credit, spurred modest job growth in high-tech sectors.
And the Congressional Office for International Leadership Accountability and Reform Act of 2026, House Bill 8139, creates an oversight office within the State Department to audit U.S. leadership programs abroad, ensuring funds are used effectively and aligning them with democratic promotion goals. Trines and procedural insight.
A quick note on how these bills get to the floor. Most start in a relevant committee: health bills in energy and commerce, financial bills in financial services, infrastructure and transportation and infrastructure. The committee holds hearings, may amend the text, then votes to report the bill. Once reported, the House leadership schedules it for debate under the rule that determines amendment limits and debate time.
If a bill passes the House, it moves to the Senate, where a parallel process occurs. For bills that originated in the House, the Senate may pass it as is, amend it, or reject it. Any differences are resolved in a conference committee, which produces a final version that both chambers must approve before the President can sign it into law.
Resolutions like Senate Resolution 430 and House Resolution 788, because they don't appropriate funds or change law, skip the conference stage and become effective once both chambers adopt them. DOMS April 6, 2026, Congressional Record highlights.
The Congressional Record for April 6, 2026, Volume 172, Number 62, gives us a snapshot of that day's activity. Speaker pro tempore Addison P. McDowell presided, and the House approved the previous day's journal, a routine step that officially records past proceedings.
The record notes the signing of two enrolled Senate bills: Senate Bill 1884, which clarifies the Holocaust Expropriated Art Recovery Act of 2016, and Senate Bill 3971, extending the Small Business Innovation Research (SBIR) and Small Business Technology Transfer (STTR) programs. Both bills have long-term implications. SBIR STTR extensions continue to funnel federal R&D dollars into small business innovation, a cornerstone of U.S. tech leadership.
The House also received executive communications from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Those communications typically contain final rules or guidance that affect regulated industries. Think new mortgage risk standards or updated emissions limits.
Notably, the day's agenda included a resolution to impeach former President Donald J. Trump. While impeachment resolutions are rare and highly political, the fact that it was introduced signals ongoing partisan dynamics that can affect legislative cooperation on the other bills we discussed. Implications for everyday Americans.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? The Energy Appreciation and Hydrogen Days are largely symbolic. but they could pave the way for future funding bills that support jobs in the energy sector. The Cuba funding restriction may limit future military engagements, potentially reducing overseas spending.
Healthcare bills could lower out-of-pocket costs for surgeries, stabilize provider payments, and expand access to cutting-edge digital health tools. The Perinatal Workforce Act directly targets maternal and infant health outcomes, especially in underserved areas.
Financial reforms aim to protect your savings. Higher deposit insurance limits and stronger oversight of mid-sized banks could make your money safer during economic turbulence.
Infrastructure and wildlife bills address everyday concerns, from more resilient roads that stay open during storms to protecting fisheries that support local economies.
And the Compete Act's tax incentives could translate into more high-tech jobs in your community, while the Oversight Office created by the International Leadership Accountability Act seeks to ensure U.S. foreign aid is used effectively, indirectly influencing global stability. What to watch for?
Keep an eye on committee hearings for the healthcare and financial bills. Those are where the details get hammered out, and stakeholder testimony can shift provisions.
Also watch the Senate's action on the House bills. If the Senate amends any of them, a conference committee will be needed, which can add weeks to the timeline.
Finally, the implementation of the Roadway Resiliency Act will depend on how quickly the Department of Transportation issues grant guidelines. States that act fast could see projects break ground before the next election cycle.
That's a wrap for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on Capital Catch-Up.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back next week with more congressional analysis.